Hello, welcome back to Raising Arrows Mama for installment 3 in creating or curating your own Charlotte Mason homeschool curriculum. My name is Heather, Mama to 8 or soon to be 8, and today I want to share the third steps or third installment on how to create your own curriculum. If you are curious about those other steps, please go back to the previous videos as I go into them in a little more detail. But as always, if you have a question, just drop it down in the comment box and I will get back to you as soon as possible, barring whenever this little one is due. Maybe a little bit late on that one then. Real quick recap, if you really don't want to go back to those videos, is start with prayer, set your start date, check your calendars, set your start date, list all the subjects you want to study, choose your history stream, choose your science and major studies for the year, your focus, not the resources, just the focus, and your math as well. Today, we're going to get into the resources a little bit. I know you're still like, what are we doing, lady? But I promise breaking it down in these little steps will help your mind, because when you try to do it all at once, it gets a little overwhelming. So my list of subjects, which I do share on that first video, and you can print it out if you want to see what we're doing. I list my subject. I chose our history stream, which is modern. And I chose our science cycles following the Sabbath Mood homeschool schedule. Next thing is the resource brain dump. And I actually probably started this first, and you may have too, but basically it's just like a whole bunch of papers of resources. And I have lists and post-its everywhere of things that, as I knew going into it, that we were going to be doing modern history. If I saw a title, I would write it down. If I had an idea, I'd write it down. Once I knew about some of our science choices, I could start writing those things down. I'm not saying I'm doing this. I'm just making a note. I mean, it really is. It's like chaos here. And so I started doing what I call a resource brain dump, but just listing everything and anything that comes across. If I see something shiny and pretty on Instagram and I'm like, oh, I like that, I'll write it down. Because if I go and purchase, then I might not use it, and that would just behoove me. So I've got my resources, and you're going to keep doing that. You're going to look for books. You're going to look for programs. You're going to look for printables. You want to look for, don't actually get them unless you're wanting to read the books, which I do recommend pre-reading, especially if you're not sure. And that's part of why I do this early. I started reading probably last fall a few more of our books, especially from the 20th century, because it's insane to try to get the 20th and 21st century all in one year. And it's nerve-wracking. Anyways, I digress. But you're going to just have that resource brain dump. So I'll give you an example here. I typed up how I was going to do the 20th century, and I'll go more in depth on this in another video by itself. And then I have people that oh, these are famous people we want to include in our book of centuries or on our timelines. These are topics for each decade that I want to return. I even had my husband go through and what about this? And what were his notes? He's like, what about the moon landing? I was like, oh yeah, I should cover the moon landing. He's like, you put Louis Zamperini in World War I instead of World War II. Oh yeah, and temperance movement and things like that. So it was a working together kind of thing of finding resources, and we'll still continue to do that. And I try to pre-read or listen to audiobooks as I can, read reviews as often as I can. Right now, it's just getting those places I like to look for resources so that I can do my resource step is Read Aloud Revival's book list, Ambleside Online's book list, according to whatever century. And they do have it. I know their website is confusing, but if you click on the year, you can see right at the top before you look through the book list what decade or century or whatever they're doing for that particular year. And then you can look through the list. I feel like modern history falls in 6th grade and partially 12th grade on theirs. I could be wrong about that. And then you can look at their book list for that, and it just gives you ideas. Letters from Nebby sounds weird, but she has amazing book lists, and she gives some good reviews and feedback from a large family, from a Christian family perspective. And she'll even say we read this book, but I don't recommend it. Or we watched this movie. This is a great tie-in, things like that. And so I really love hers because it is so specific. Letters from Nebby, and I'll look up just other random lists from different places. I will occasionally look at Simply Charlotte Mason or Alvieri videos or those other curriculums and pull from them, because it's not that I don't think they're great curriculums, it's just that they don't work as a whole for our family. And sometimes I watch the videos or I look at the book list and I'm like, this is not for us. And that's okay too. But it does help me to kind of note and get my resources gathered, especially when you're doing ancient history. You're a little bit more, you have less things, it seems like, for certain topics. Like we did a term of South American history, ancient history, because my kids were interested, like, well, what was going on in South America? I'm like, that's a really good question. I don't know. And those resources are insanely hard to find. Ancient China, if you want to do something like that, you don't have to follow the Sabbath moods lineation for ancient times. We don't always do that. We do like to kind of follow our own, but I do make sure I start looking for all those. So I have all my 20th and 21st century. I haven't figured out our ancient history stream, exactly what resources we're doing for that, but I'm just starting to gather that. Like, oh, I saw a Spanish curriculum that looked really good. Or I went to a conference recently and I saw some physical geography things that I wanted to implement. So I wrote those resources down. Resource dump. Everything you can think of or find, whatever, have it on Post-its, notebooks. Just try to keep it all in one place, because otherwise you look like an insane person like me trying to find it. The next thing I have to do is a timetable rough draft. And that is where I am at right now and what I'm working on. I say a timetable rough draft because 2 reasons. One, I am not a timetable person. I'm trying to teach myself to be a timetable person, but I'm not good at it. The question that I have discovered over time is there's 3 components to creating your timetable. Do I have enough time for all these subjects? How much time will we have school each day? And which subjects will be family and which will be independent? And you could totally go the Charlotte Mason way. And if you do like a delectable education, they like have schedule cards and they have how many times a week you should have a lesson, how long those lessons should be. And it's all based on Charlotte Mason's. And I do have a printable that I will link that goes through all of that. And so like Form 1B should have, which is first grade, you should have 2 hours and 30 minutes of school in the morning, nothing else. Whereas in 10th grade, my oldest will be in 10th grade next year. That's crazy. 4 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. Things like that. The other thing is individual lessons. How long should they be? Well, they should be about 10 to 20 minutes for first graders, but they should be ranging more like 30 to 45 for older grades. And then you can even, like I said, find out how many times a week you're supposed to do that. And I think Ambleside Online and a Delectable Education share that on their websites. It's a little nerve-wracking for me, and I don't necessarily want to follow that parameter. If you want to follow that parameter, go check out those resources, because the ladies who have created those websites have done a wonderful job. But I'm going to go through those 3 questions of, do I have enough time for all those subjects? So you saw my subject list. Okay, this is an extensive subject list. This is a lot of subjects. Do we really have time to cover all that in a week? No, we don't. We really don't. And so I have to decide, well, what am I going to cut? How many times a week am I going to do this lesson? When? How long does it actually take? And one of the things I found is that I can either choose to read a chapter, or I can choose to set a timer and read for 15 minutes and then have them narrate. I can't necessarily do both, especially as they get older. For an example, we're reading Abraham Lincoln's World, and they're short chapters, but it takes about 30 minutes to read, 3 small chunks of it and narrate. And so I have decided that for our family, it's the momentum in the book, not necessarily the time, but I do watch the clock. The very first year that I did this, I set a timer for every lesson to train myself to keep them short. And so now I don't have to set the timer as much because I have a feel for how long the lesson should be. But if you're just starting out, set the timer, because 20 minutes of reading goes by like that. And you realize, oh my goodness, I should have stopped and had them narrate like 5 pages ago, especially on harder texts like Plutarch, Charlotte Mason's ourselves, just some of these other things. And so I do recommend you use a timer at first if you're not used to the short lessons. If you are already acclimated to doing short lessons, then by all means, just watch your time and set it up that way. And so I have packed in sometimes a morning time or a lesson, and I can't actually get all that in that time. And so I've had to change our timetable, and it happens every year. That's normal. Most people are going to set a timetable for the year, and within the first few weeks, they're going to change it. That's okay. That's okay. Now, if you're in a school setting, you can't do that. But for your individual family and child, you can do that. And so I do what works for me and works for our family. And so I'm going to start doing a rough draft. I'll take last year's and I'll say, this is what worked. We're going to keep that. This did not work. We're going to kick that out. For example, our koinonia works wonderfully. Our breakfast, Bible, hymns, scripture memory, and reading a Christian book. That works wonderfully, except when I'm like super tired from being pregnant or have a newborn. Then me getting up and leading that at 7:30 in the morning isn't always going to work. And so because we'll have a newborn or an infant rather, I'm going to have to adjust that. And so just keep those things in mind. What works in one season doesn't always work in the other, whether it's adding a baby, adding a high schooler like we did this year, whether it's transitions in just seasons, when you have crisis, all these things add up and change your schedule, and it's okay to change your schedule. But before you start saying, we're going to do this resource and this resource and this resource, I encourage you to look at your timetable, set it up. I love that our Cooper Nest, Amanda at our Cooper Nests planner, it's printable. There are so many different ways you can do this. Min talks about a timetable over at Life Giving Motherhood, and she has a free blog website that you can watch and or you can read and use to help set up a timetable. And I would just pencil everything in and move things around, because you got to figure out what works for you and your family. And like I said, it's not always going to work. And so for our family, for a long time, we couldn't figure out when to get computer skills in, or, we weren't getting Shakespeare done. And if you weren't careful, then all of a sudden we forgot to do math for a whole week. Fly by the seat of your pants doesn't always work when you have a large family. If you only have one kid, it's probably a little bit easier, but I don't guarantee that. It may not be. But my point is, get a rough idea, because maybe you have these lofty ideas and it's just not all going to fit in. And so you have to say, you know what? This year we're not doing Shakespeare. It's just not going to work. Or perhaps you're not going to choose to do whatever you want. Usually most states is you got to get history, math, reading, and science. Okay. You've got 4. And if you're a Christian, you want some Bible in there, but the rest of it, the individual breakdown of things, you have the validity, the autonomy to choose. So maybe you don't want to do ancient history, world history, and American history. That's okay. Nobody's stopping you. Let me give an example here. So I look at my math. We have mental math, we have arithmetic, or mathematics, we have business math and logic, all under math. And my kids do those every week. Okay. Most people aren't doing that. You have a math curriculum and you use it. We have a math curriculum that includes, you're supposed to have some mental math in there. The way that I do that is I use a program called extramath.com that does it for free. And my kids do their mental math with that program in elementary school. And that gives them their 5 to 10 minutes a day of mental math. Then they do a mathematics lessons with me 3 to 4 days a week. Then they have a business math, which that's just because my kids think money math is fun. They love it. They love it. So we added it in 1 day a week. It practices their adding and their multiplying and their dividing and their story problem skills. They just love it. And then once a week, we also have logic, because again, my kids love logic puzzles. If they didn't want those things, I wouldn't put them in there. But those are things that make math study fun for my kids. So I added them in. If we ever don't have time, we just take those out and keep the other 2. But my point is, make it work for your family. Those are also things that they can do independently. So that's the other step. So as you're making your timetable rough draft, keep in mind those 3 questions. Do I have enough time for all these subjects? How much time will we school each day? Are you going to finish by lunch? Are you going to have to do some afternoon occupations? Should you do afternoon occupations? Do you even know what afternoon occupations are? I didn't. Which subjects will be family study? Which will be independent? because not every subject needs to be done by every student. My older kids do grammar, but my little kids do not. My very oldest, middle and high school, do government and econ, but my youngest do not. Things like that. The business math is for 4th grade and up. My 1st grader is not doing business math. Things like that. My older kids are not doing copy work because their handwriting is beautiful. So they have commonplace that they have to do once a week. Things like that you want to just consider. And so I hope this has helped you. I know it seems rather silly, but the next step, you've prayed, you've chosen your start date, you've listed all your subjects, chosen your history, science, and math streams. Now you're gonna just get your resources, gather them up, figure out what all you've got, figure out what you have in your home first too. That's always good, do an inventory with your resource dump. And then do a timetable, do it in pencil or erasable pen or on the computer, somewhere where you can move things around and shift it and figure out, do I have time and what time am I going to allocate towards these things? How many days a week are we going to do copy work? How many days a week are we going to do math? How many days a week are we going to sing hymns? Figure that out ahead of time. And then next time we will start to plug and chug with our resources. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this has helped. If you have any questions, please drop a comment below and I will try to get back to you as fast as I possibly can, all depending upon when this little one decides to join us. Thank you again. Have a blessed day.